Thanks for joining the channel. Thanks for being here. I've been getting asked many times recently how I take the photos that I take, the wildlife pictures that I get and that I share on social media and in other places. I was recently asked how I capture these photos of cedar waxwings. My photography journey begins in the studio. Before I even leave the house, I meditate, and then I pick up my camera, and I sense it, I feel it, and I decide before I leave the studio which lens I'm going to take with me that particular day on that outing. I rarely go out with the intention of shooting a specific subject, looking for a particular animal or bird or location. Occasionally I do. Very often I'm going out into nature, into a natural preserve, so I know going out there I'm going to be honoring the guidelines and the rules that are there of staying on the trail, etc., not going off trail. And there are limitations as to where I can be positioned, etc., when I'm taking the pictures that I take. So I'll pick and choose which lens I'm taking with me. In this case, this is the kit lens that came with the camera. It's 24mm to 105mm. It's an RF lens. And I frequently will take that. My go-to lens, however, is the newer RF100-500. Purchased this a couple months ago. The 500mm focal length really allows me to reach out and take images, useful images, powerful images of birds and other animals from a distance without disturbing them too much, but also allowing them to come up close. The minimum focal distance of this is amazing. I choose which lens I'm taking before I leave, and it typically is the only lens that I take, knowing that I may encounter subjects along the way, along the trail, that I wished maybe I would have a different lens. The lens that's on the camera right now is a 35mm lens. I take that out once in a while also, just for the quality and the type of images that a lens allows me to take, knowing I won't be able to take any telephoto type long-distance shots of animals and other aspects of what's out there in nature. So how do I choose a lens? While I'm holding the camera, when I pick it up, I sense into it, I feel it, I feel the weight of it. I draw my awareness in mindfully and feeling the weight, the textures, the temperature of the camera, the feel in the hand, not only what's coming in through the fingertips, but what comes in through the rest of the body. What are my muscles doing? How does it affect my breathing? It's a mindful experience for me to checking in with the camera, becoming familiar with it, and say, okay, what's my intention? Setting an intention before I even leave the studio, with very little motivation or striving as to, okay, I'm going to go out and take a particular kind of a picture. So once I arrive at my location, I have to drive to it. I'll find a parking place somewhere. I spend a lot of time in this one particular natural preserve. It's Mission Trails Regional Park in San Diego County. I'm very familiar with various aspects of the park, but each time I go out, it's always different for me. And I open to that experience simply as I'm pulling in and finding a place to park my car. And as I'm getting out of the car, reaching in, getting my camera once again, checking in with it. And then before I even step away from the car, locking it, closing the doors, locking the trunk, I pause and I ground myself. I literally draw my awareness down to my feet, planted on the earth, and sensing that solidness, the support that the earth gives in that moment. And also spending a few moments just simply drawing my awareness to the air that I'm breathing, the air around me, the warmth of it, the coolness of it. Is there a breeze? Is it still? The lighting, the sunlighting. Is the sun shining? Is it a cloudy day? Is it still dark? Is it turning dark? The lighting is super important for photography for sure, but also for setting my intention as to moving out away from the car to explore, to be open and curious as to what's going to be coming my way. in the form of taking a picture or choosing not to take a picture. And then I start to look around. And at some point, I decide to move, moving with awareness toward some direction, not necessarily toward a destination. So this idea that I tend to cultivate over time is the sense of a beginner's mind. Even though I may have visited this park hundreds of times, maybe even parked in the same general parking space many times, each time is different. And I embrace it as though I've never done it before. Like it's the first time. And in doing that, I start opening to seeing things, whether it's new birds, new animals that I've never seen before, seeing a familiar bird in a new setting, or seeing other aspects of the park that I've never opened up to. And depending on what the lens is and the setup I have with my kit, then I might start taking pictures right away, or I might walk for miles for an hour or so and not take one photo, and yet still being present and observing and soaking in what's coming my way. I have a go-to settings now that I've recently been experimenting with, and that's setting the shutter speed up around 1/1500th of a second or 1/2000th of a second. Moving the aperture up toward maybe f8, and auto ISO. Trusting the camera to do some of the heavy work because I'm using such a long lens and I'm in conditions that are unpredictable, that are out of my control. So controlling for the shutter speed and the aperture and then allowing the camera to set ISO initially allows me to dive in with some of the unexpectedness that comes in. Many of the animals that I do take photographs on are moving quickly and unexpectedly in directions that I have no idea where they're headed. So to be able to do all of this quickly, not quite point and shoot, but it's getting there. And then as things begin to unfold with a particular subject, if the animals stay in present long enough for me to then start making adjustments, I start framing differently. I might start changing my position, adjusting the camera, maybe pulling the shutter speed down, maybe pushing it up, depending on what it is. Some of the smaller, fast-moving birds going up to 1/3000th of a second, 1/4000th. Just recently, I was taking some photographs and took it all the way up to 1/6000th of a second, trusting that the ISO will go up with it. The camera can handle it, and then the processing later on, I may sacrifice a little bit of clarity and get a little bit of noise, but I'm also gaining something on being able to freeze something in flight, in motion, whether it's a hummingbird, the flapping of a wings, or grabbing a bug out of the midair, whatever it is. Being able to make those adjustments on the fly with awareness, but starting with those initial settings. I continually tap into my mindful awareness practices, mindful walking, for instance, whether I'm sensing my footsteps on the ground while I'm looking around, constantly aware of the camera position in my hand, the smells, the sounds that are around me, using so many of the senses to bring in information with an awareness to pick and choose. Do I pause? Do I look around? Do I take a picture? Do I not take a picture? What's capturing my attention and what's not capturing my attention? These are all mindful awarenesses that I deliberately turn toward without any expectations coming out as to anything particular will emerge. And many times I will pause, stop along the trail, along my walk, and simply stand or sit, whether there's a bench, a rock to sit on, or whatever it is. I'll pause and be present with whatever's around, with whatever's going on within me, and also outside, what's going on around me. In doing that, sometimes things present themselves to me, and I simply will be present for it and find myself taking a photograph with intention of a creature that's somehow come in close, almost like an invitation. what about the Cedar Waxwings? I was specifically asked the question how I photograph the Cedar Waxwings. It was more than coincidence. I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that things are coincidental or accidental, more of synchronicity. It's my awareness to be present. And in this particular case, I was leaving the car. I'd only set out on my walk about 15 feet in front of the car, not planning on taking photographs of birds. But I nearly always carry my camera with me to allow for the opportunity that if something presents itself, I have it and I can take a photograph if able. Became aware of bird songs coming from the direction of a leafless tree. As I looked up into the tree, I saw a flurry of bird activity in the tree. So I paused and looked at it, and there were several birds coming in and out of the tree, landing on limbs, staying for moments, sometimes staying for several seconds and leaving, going somewhere else. The lighting was not good in this particular location. The sun was harsh. It was just coming up, coming in from a particular angle. The sky was brightly lit. The backdrop to the tree silhouetted everything in the tree, the birds, the limbs, everything. Not the best conditions, yet it might be the only opportunity I have to take that photo. So I raised the camera, decided how much zooming in I wanted to do. Being able to use a zoom lens gives me that flexibility. And I took several photos. And while doing so, I was noticing, being able to zoom in, that these were cedar waxwings, rare for this location in the park for this time of the year. And then I made the choice. My intention that morning wasn't to be taking photographs. I was on my way to a picnic table to settle in and do some writing on a project that I've been working on. And then I started adjusting. Knowing the layout, knowing where I was, knowing the environment I was in, I took some pictures and I changed my position and moved into a parking lot that is hardly ever used during this particular time of day. Seeing the birds landing in a bush, so leaving the leafless tree, and they were coming into a toyon bush that was located over on the other side. Now I have the sun in a different position, the light angle's different, the backdrop is different, everything was different. In my approach, especially with birds that tend to be a little bit nervous, a little bit skittish, is to continue taking pictures from far away and start moving closer if possible. And that's what I did with these guys, is I found a position where there was a bush that I could stand next to, not behind, but I stand next to another bush, keeping some distance, probably 20 or 30 yards away from these birds. While they came in and out of this toyon bush, the toyon bush is covered in red berries. These birds are known, in San Diego anyway, to really enjoy being with this bush and eating the berries out of it. I get this image of a sparrow sharing the same bush with the cedar waxwings. And in this image, you can barely see the cedar waxwing hiding behind a leaf and a branch, but here's a sparrow. And then the magic happened. So my process is that I don't really have a process, but I do have a process. I move out into the environment, staying curious, being open to the unexpected. So when I go out and I have a particular lens, the lens sets the tone, but not always. Sometimes I will, with intention, take two lenses and carry it with me in my bag so that I know that I now have a different kind of a choice. And it's all part of my mindfulness practice to draw awareness to how I'm choosing, what I'm perceiving. So much of what is occurring is the perceptions are coming in whether I'm paying attention or not. So it's like, what if I pay attention to it and it opens me up to taking photographs that turn into then memories? I often, in my practices, ponder what is a moment. And if I'm taking a still image at 1/3000th of a second, that becomes a moment. That's way faster than I have the ability to notice. But I can freeze it through the camera, and then what comes with it afterwards when I look at it later or when I share it with other people and they feel something, they sense something when they get a chance to look at it.